Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's Black Hills Information Security webcast. My name is Jason Blanchard. I'm the Content Community Director here at Black Hills Information Security. If you ever need a red team, you know, active SOC, anti-SOC, pen test, please come and find us. We absolutely want to help you, especially in 2025 with the year coming up. So reach out. All right. So Dave is going to be giving our webcast today. Today is Dave's first Black Hills webcast. All right. So testers join the team. We have 40 plus full-time testers. And so at any given time, I will reach out to those testers and say, hey, here are the dates that we have available. Would you like to give a webcast? And so Dave was new, and I reached out to Dave and I was like, here's the dates, Dave. And he's like, yeah, I'll take that one. And I was like, cool. What do you want to talk about? And he's like, I don't know. What should we talk about? And I was like, what is something that you love and that you're excited about? And he's like, how about a beginner's guide to creating Burp Suite extensions? And I was like, that's awesome. All right, so that's what's going to happen here today. Dave's going to give his very first Black Hills Information Security webcast. Please welcome Dave Blandford. Dave, I'll be backstage in case people have questions or in case you have questions. You can always engage on Discord. That's for the community. Feel free to engage in Discord. Make sure to check in for Hack It Today. If you don't know what that means, I'll come back at the end and explain it. And for everyone else, thank you so much for joining us today, for spending your time with us. And hopefully, you've had a great 2024, and thank you so much for all the time you spent with us and that you may spend with us again next year. We have one more webcast next week, and then after that, Christmas break, and then we'll be back in the new year. So Dave, are you ready?
I'm good to go.
All right, I'm going to head backstage. I'll be here if you need me for anything at all. Good luck, Dave.
Will do. Thank you.
Godspeed.
Thank you. Okay. Well, good afternoon. Thanks for joining. So yeah, we're gonna talk about creating burp extensions. It's gonna be just a broad overview. If we have time at the end, we'll dive into a demo. But yeah, we'll just it'll be just at that beginner's level on creating a burp extension. So for today's agenda, we're just gonna start with an introduction, kind of dive into what is a burp extension if you might not be familiar with what a burp extension is or what it does or why somebody might need it. We'll go into what do I need to do to create my extension. So we'll dive into a little bit. So if you're just getting started, how do we get the environment right? How do we prepare? Then we're going to talk about the Montoya API that is used to work within Burp Suite, or used in our extension to integrate into Burp Suite. And then if we have time, like I mentioned, we'll do a demo. And now, because if you were here for the pre-show banter, I've got Bigfoot in my head, so we'll probably talk a little bit about Bigfoot throughout. If he's real, if he exists, if he does, what Bigfoot eats, how he's gone so long without being discovered. But we'll dive into that. So first things first, what is Burp Suite? So Burp Suite, for us that do application testing, so when you think like a mobile app, a web application, or maybe a desktop application, but a Burp Suite is going to be a proxy that allows us to place ourselves in the middle from that client to the backend server, and we're able to see what's being sent. We're able to see what's being sent back, what the reply is. And within Burp Suite, there's different features where we can modify. We can modify requests. We can modify a request to do certain actions that maybe isn't intended or might give us some results as a hacker that we like to see. So you have like intruder and repeater are features that are already built in. So repeater will let you can take a request, you can send it to repeater, and then you can just send that request, make modifications when they're within it. Excuse me. Intruder is going to let us, we can define a spot where we can define a position in our request. And then we can use word list or certain types of different variables, and we can supply those in multiple requests. So intruder just does that. It's just going to iterate through a bunch of requests in a payload position defined that changes. But the bottom line is Burp Suite is just going to be a web application proxy we use to see the traffic between the client and the backend server. I'm sorry. So I got my notes here. So Burp Suite, yeah, and like we kind of went over the core uses. So why would I want to create an extension? Why would you want to create an extension? So with I like Burp Suite. I think it's great out of the box. Even the community edition, it serves a purpose, but it doesn't cover all use cases. So there are certain, like, just stock out of the box Burp Suite doesn't. You may be testing an application that does something that you need a little bit more to fully test it or fully see what vulnerabilities might be there. So introduce extensions. So they have the BAP store, and in the BAP store you'll see it if you use Burp, and then it comes with pre-configured extensions, or I'm sorry, not pre-configured, but it comes with extensions already loaded into that store that you can install on your machine. And so, like, and we'll cover some really good extensions here in a minute that I like, but it gives us a little bit more than what Burp Suite has out of the box. So the prerequisites for creating an extension, you have to have a need. You have to have a want. So there has to be a reason that you need to make that extension. We'll dive into that a little bit more as well, but there's a whole section on what the prerequisites are. So I won't dive too much into it here. And then how can an extension improve my testing? And we'll cover that on the next slide as well, but it gives you a lot more coverage. And one example on the next slide it'll really highlight how it improves my testing. So first, what is a burp extension? So this is going to solve a problem that we might not even know we had. I mean, we could know we have it, but we might not know we have it. So, like I was saying earlier, out of the box Burp Suite, it doesn't catch everything. So we can use an extension to cover more use cases. And a big example, one I use all the time, one I absolutely love, is the JWT editor. So the JSON web token that comes, it's just base 64 encoded. It's used for a variety of purposes. But you see them a lot in web applications, especially like a single page web application where it's a lot of front end JavaScript, and we're going to make a back end call to an API. They implement a JWT, and then it's kind of laborious to take it out, decode it, figure out what it's doing, figure out if roles, find out if it's signed. So JWT editor, that's an extension in the BAP store. You can install, and it just all of a sudden you can instantly decode, you can modify, you can check if it's signed. If it isn't signed, or you have a workaround for that, you're able to modify that JWT on the spot. So, or when you send it to repeater, for example. So it's a great tool, saves a lot of time. It makes us as testers more efficient. It's better use of our time, because a lot of times when you're on a test, you only have a limited amount of time. When you have 5, 10, whatever amount of days, and you have a lot of area to cover. So JWT editor makes us more efficient. Logger is another great one that I use all the time. So a lot of times, so if I get a question like, hey, I'm just starting out with web app testing, what extension would you recommend? This is the one that I always recommend, because a lot of times with web application testing, this has been my experience, the conditions for the vulnerability, or the conditions for your use case, have already been proven. You might have just missed it. Logger++, it takes logging and turns it to 11. So it allows you to tailor your logging to see if you, like, in your request or in your tools, if the condition you're trying to match has already occurred. Logger++ is a tool that just helps you see what you've done, and gives you a better insight to what's going on when you're running Burp Suite, when you're running an attack through Burp Suite, or when your requests are going through Burp Suite. I absolutely love that one as well. And then there's the copy 4 extension. So this one isn't released publicly, but I talked to tester here at Black Hills, he is going to release it. And this one has been it's been a real time saver for me. So back to being efficient as a tester, being efficient with my time as a tester. Copy 4 is it's a Python extension that you just, what it allows for is you can take nuclei, NICTO, just all the tools that you may commonly use as a web application tester, and you can just right click and it'll give you the command. Because I'll speak for myself, I don't remember the nuclei command every single time for every use case. So I'll have to oftentimes refer back to my notes for that. But this has just been a time saver, so it makes me more efficient. So I believe a blog is coming out about the tool that this extension that's getting released here. But it also he has so it didn't have a GUI originally, but now it does have a graphical user interface. And so now you can set up so if you're using we'll stick with nuclei. If you're using nuclei and you have specific templates you want to run, or you have a specific use case that you're always going to run into, you can put that in the GUI and it's saved. So it makes you more efficient as a tester. You're using your time more wisely. So burp extensions help us solve that problem. It not only does it help us solve or help us find vulnerabilities, making whatever the use case is, but we'll stick with making your client more secure, finding vulnerabilities and doing that. It makes us more efficient with their time. So burp extensions help improve our testing capabilities. So then we ask, like, how are they made? So if you've ever taken the time to look at what languages or what's supported in Burp Suite as far as extension, they allow for Python. So Python, you need Jython or JSON, and that's Python, but in Java. And it's limited in its support. So it supports Python 2.7. And I bet you, I'll speak for myself. I think I've finally broken the habit of some of the old Python 2.7 syntax problems that I was still holding on to when I'm writing in Python 3. So I just try not to look back. I try not to look back at Python 2.7. It was great. It was great. I liked it, but I've got to use Python 3. So it's, even with the print statements, it's different. So but there are great extensions that are written in Python, copy 4 being a prime example of that. I choose that, just is not the path I usually choose when it comes to burp extensions. So we have Java, and Java is Burp Suite is written in Java. So Burp Suite is going to be friendlier to, I shouldn't even say that, but in my mind, it's friendlier to burp extensions that are written in Java. It does support Kotlin. So if you're an Android developer and you're comfortable, you use Kotlin a lot, go ahead and you can go ahead and write your extension in Kotlin. So I always think, so with Java, writing a burp extension in Java, I always think, so I'm here in Michigan, and this time of year, the deer are running around everywhere. So if you're lucky enough to not hit a deer, somebody that's hit a deer. And so they have the car at the body shop, and you'll get the estimate, and it'll say, well, it's this amount of money, and you can use the OEM, original equipment from the manufacturer, or it's cheaper, but you can use something that wasn't made by the manufacturer. So in my mind, I have that example of why I want to use Java. That's the OEM language for Burp Suite. So that's why I've chosen to write my extensions in Java. One thing to note, though, is Burp Suite supports extensions written in Java 21 or lower. Just making a note of that, just so we cover it. Shouldn't affect too much. But when you're making your extension, you just have to account for that. if you choose to write it in Java. And Ruby, so that one you do need JRuby to run those extensions. On a personal note, I'm a little bit scarred by a Ruby on Rails web app that I managed for a little bit. So I will avoid Ruby at all costs. I will, if you see me at a conference and you want to talk Ruby, I'll talk about anything but Ruby. And that's a joke, but it was yeah, I inherited a sorry, Jason.
Hey, Dave, I got a quick thing for you.
Yeah.
Just take a little bit of water.
Okay.
Yeah, just we'll help you with that cough. And then that way we'll get back to it. All right, Dave,
All
you're
right.
doing great. All right, awesome. I'm heading back.
All right. But yeah, so I got a web application that I took over. It was Ruby. It was a Ruby on Rails app, and it it was a pain. So it was infrastructure as a service, and there were updates before I got in, and the reason I got to take over the application is the application just didn't exist anymore, and it was I won't bore everybody with a really long story, but I'm scarred by that experience, so no Ruby. And then this extension here, I meant to have this slide one back, but this extension I have big hopes for. I still need a use case to try it out, but it's Sneaks Socket Sleuth. So this is designed to extend intruder, interception, and a whole lot of other functionality to WebSockets. And if you're not familiar with what WebSockets are, so if you have kids, or if you've been a kid before or seen how a parent and a child react, so I imagine this is how I imagine it in my head. So an HTTP request, that's going to be like a parent talking to a child, because you're going to say, do you have homework? And you'll just get like a yes, no back. So you get that 200 response. Or where is your jacket? So you get like a 301, 302 redirect. And that'll, I'm going to have to ask mom, go ask mom. Or like, how did the test go? 500, you'll get an error. In WebSockets, I imagine it as like if the child had initiated the conversation and, like, hey, can I go to the game? So it's full duplex. The exchanges are back and forth in a full duplex mode. And it's not getting that server response. It's just a lot of, can I go to the game? Can I go to the game? Can I go to the game? And the topic may change. So that's I think about analogies a lot, and that's how I have WebSockets in my head. But all that to say, it is a little difficult. Burp Suite is not the best at handling WebSockets requests, or for testing it, for extending the testing. So this particular extension is not in the BAP store, but it is publicly available, and it does extend some of that testing to WebSockets. So if anybody's used it, I'd throw it in the chat if you've had success with it. But this is one that I have big hopes for. So this kind of goes back to, why is an extension made? There is a problem. So WebSockets, testing it fully, extending. I just saw somebody put a 404 for the coats. That's funny. In the chat, but there's a problem with WebSocket testing. To fully extend it, this is an extension that somebody has made to extend Burp Suite's testing functionality to WebSockets. So we'll talk for a little bit about the environment. So what do we need to create an extension? If you're new to this, how do we create our environment? So you're gonna need Java. And if you're gonna develop in Java, you're gonna need the Java Development Kit. That's a JDK, or the Open JDK, which is the open version. But you may be saying, well, I have Java. on my computer, but it all depends to, you may have Java, but you may not have the Java development kit. So a key point is we have our Java development kit, which is a JDK, which extends, if we're going to develop, it extends some functionality for that. We have our JRE, which is our Java runtime environment. And then we have a JVM, which is our Java virtual machine. So the JRE is the runtime environment. That is going to give us the Java extent, or the Java functionality to run Java on our host. The JVM is going to be what actually runs the Java. So, or that's going to, yeah, the JVM is the Java virtual machine that is going to run it. So we have in Burp, or the Burp installer actually has a bundled JRE in that as well. So you'll be able to run Burp. Even that solves a lot of Java issues when you're running Burp. The only hiccups you'll encounter with that is if you're running it from the command line. So if you think, like, if you're running it as a jar file, you may encounter issues there. But the key takeaway from here is you need if you're gonna develop in Java, you're gonna need to have the JDK on your host. So let's take a break and just kind of go over the history of Java a little bit. So the hat tip goes to James Gosling. So this language has been he's the creator of Java, and it's been around for a long time. So Java was created in about 1990s, give or take. It's been around a long time. So it was created to run on embedded devices. So they I think it was C++ was going to be the first, was the first choice, but C++ has some memory issues. So they ended up creating Java to solve that. The name is uninspired. It is literally drinking coffee and thought I should name this Java. But that was around 1990. So it's been around a long time, and Java's everywhere. And I have this football picture here because I'm in Michigan. The Detroit Lions are doing good, and I was thinking, well, how would you describe, if people are asking you, like, every time I hear somebody talk about Java, it's always kind of like how they talk about the Detroit Lions pre 2020. Oh, it's written in Java. Oh, it's bad. But I don't take Java. It just where it kind of had like a negative, like, oh, it's written in Java. Oh, it can't be that good. It's in Java. But Java is a great language. I've really grown to like it over the years, and it does extend some great functionality. So it is a compiled language, and you might be saying, well, I thought it was interpreted. So technically it's both. So you take your Java file, and then it gets compiled into a class file, and that's the bytecode. And then it's interpreted at runtime. So technically it's both. And you might be in, so Java, it can come in a couple different file extensions. You can think of a WAR file if you're thinking like a web application. But most commonly it's going to come as a jar file, which is going to be it's just a zipped file if you think of it at the simplest level, with the compiled Java classes in it. There's more in it, but that's that. And so when it's run, you'll have another term just to familiarize yourself with is the just-in-time, or JIT. So when that program is running, a way to make it more efficient is a lot of times it'll be interpreted right at runtime, and that's with and just to make Java more efficient, it's going to use that just-in-time interpretation. So if we've started if we started making our code, we have our Java code, we have all our classes, and we have our properties and all that. How do we get it into a Java or into a jar file? Well, we need to compile that. So with Javik, we have that's the native compilation. So I use that. I still do use it, but I used it before. But for bigger projects, I'd like to enjoy my weekends. It's kind of a pain. It doesn't do it gets a little complicated. So it's great for a single file, but you have to manage your own dependencies. And if you use this for a large project, if you're at an enterprise or an org, and you're using this for a large project, I'd love to hear about it if you throw it in the chat. If you're not using like a build tool like Gradle or Maven. And then there's Gradle. So this is a fast building build tool. That's another way we can compile. As part of it's a build tool that compiles. Android loves it. So if you've ever used Android Studio, that's built with Gradle, and it can be a little bit hard to debug, and it's great for mobile app development. Now, Burp Suite actually in their documentation they recommend using Gradle as they recommend using Gradle over Maven. But it has built-in features for Groovy and Kotlin, so it's good for Android. It's good for Android building, APK building. Maven is what I use, and that's what we'll cover in the next couple slides. It does have some cool plugins. I like it because it's easy versioning. It does have some built-in tests as well. And for me, it's the easy button for dependency management. So it's real easy just to, when you're bringing in your dependencies, when you're using dependencies, it makes it real easy. Just handle it in a XML and an XML configuration file. So, yep, with Maven, we need to take our code and make it compile bytecode. So it's an easy way to make a jar file. But Maven will help us accomplish that task. So the key thing to take away from this slide is it's not just a compiler. It still uses the Java compiler via a plugin, but it's a build tool. It's a build tool that helps us do that. So for the command structure for Maven, so just MVN and then your command. So you can clean your directory, you can compile, you can install, you can deploy. So the key difference with install and deploy is install is going to be local. Deploy is going to be if you were hosting on GitHub or GitLab or somewhere, you can go there. And then it lets you run unit tests. So if you write some unit tests, you'll be able to Maven will handle that for you. So the typical build order is going to be that it'll validate, it'll compile, it'll test and do your unit test, it'll package, it'll verify, it'll install locally, and then if you have it defined, it'll deploy. So what is the POM.xl file? So this is going to be the quarterback, or like the main. This is going to be where we're going to define our dependencies, define our repo that we might be deploying to. A lot of it's covered in here, or it's going to be covered in the POM.xl file. So you'll have your project configuration, your dependency management, the build lifecycle, and the version control. So this is one from Apache's Maven project utils. I just grabbed it off GitHub, and I cut some stuff out of it, but the main things there is it'll have the metadata of the file. So we have the group ID, and that's usually going to be in the reverse domain name. So you see it there, org.apache. We'll have the artifact ID and the version and how we're going to package it. So in here, we've got our properties that are defined. And then the key thing that I like about this, or what I wanted to show, was the dependencies. I only showed one dependency here, but this is, you just define the dependency in here, and you have to include the group ID, artifact ID, and the version, and the project, I'm sorry, and the scope. And then that it handles the dependencies for you. Because when you're writing, you're gonna end up using dependencies specifically for, like, we're gonna use the Montoya API, so we're gonna need to import that in. So this is a way to handle that. So we got writing your code next. So you're gonna need a place to write your code. So a text editor or an IDE. I've kind of gotten in the bad habit of using Visual Studio Code, and I only say that, like, sorry, the Free Software Foundation, because I've gone through. I don't have a Microsoft account. I don't have a Google account. I've just kind of cut everything out, but I still use Visual Studio Code. The reason it's real easy. The plugins are great. The makes it real easy to code. It's real easy to debug. So I like Visual Studio Code. I haven't used it, but I do get a lot of feedback that IntelliJ, their IDE, is great for Java products. But I haven't used it, so that's just what I've heard. I have used Eclipse. It's been around for a long time, and it just integrates easy with Java as well. It's just been around. But you're going to need a place to write your code, and it's a little bit easier if you're just starting out than using VI or Vim to use an IDE. So you will need Burp. So you're going to need to test your extension. You're going to need to make sure you hit what your requirements are. That your extension loads, it unloads, it's doing what it's supposed to do. So from Portswigger's site, this is their basic recommendations. If you've been using Burp for a while, you kind of have an idea where it will run. And but they're saying the recommended is 2 cores and 16 gigs of RAM, and then it's going to take up space. So Burp just naturally takes up a lot of space. So saying from their site, it's 2 gigs of space per project file. Then the operating system and the browser, I was going to talk a little bit about that. So I don't like, when I'm using Burp, I don't like to use the embedded browser. I like Firefox for the most part. It just easily works in there. And I recently heard at a conference that the browser is not ideal for using that, because it's only embedded in there for Burp Suite's own testing, or the own tests that they that are in Burp are the own extensions. So it's not a fully functional browser. Haven't had a chance to really dive into that. But it was just like it was an offhanded comment. So I like to have Firefox, but I made a note here to stop talking about Burp, because I could probably talk about Burp I could probably talk about Burp for the rest of this presentation. And a positive attitude. I wrote that in there for myself, and for you if you need it. But when I'm coding, you're gonna hit the wall. I'm gonna hit walls. I'm gonna hit roadblocks. I don't mean literally hitting the wall, but just hitting a wall with, as far as progress. Little things I can get hung up on. So just keeping a positive attitude, getting that extension, getting your code to where it needs to be. So now we'll dive into the Montoya API. So this is this is what we use to write our extension in. So I put a couple links in there. And what you're looking for here is the or what the picture's showing here is the documentation. It's the Java doc that's produced from the Montoya API. So a little note about Java doc, like with Java, a Java doc basically allows you, if you comment and write your code appropriately, you can just create like a Java doc. You can create HTTP, like basically what the code's supposed to do as an HTTP website or as an HTTP document, sorry. And it's an easy way to view what the code's supposed to do. So with the Montoya API, they have a lot of examples. So on their GitHub page, they have a lot of examples. So it's a great resource if you're trying to write one thing specifically, or if you're hitting a roadblock or you want to see it implemented in a way, they've got examples that they've done it already. Let me grab a quick drink of water. So with the examples, they've done a great job of documenting everything along the way. So they have done a great job of documenting. So it's a good use case if you not too comfortable or not too familiar with how to code or how to write the extension. They've got examples. And they've got great examples. So I wanted to really stress that they have really good examples. So in here is an example of the website, the interface, the proxy WebSocket create handle or class. So it's just a great example to refer back to when you're writing your code. So when dealing with the API, we need to start thinking about interfaces. So the interface, so the Montoya API is going to, it includes the interface, and the interface is what contains the methods. So the interface is not going to implement those methods, it contains those methods. So what we need to do when we write our extension is we need to implement the interface, or we have to implement the interface. So what we need to do is we need to create a class to use that interface. So here is an example of the interface. So this is the HTTP handler interface. And what it is it's just saying we have a, so this is the interface we're going to use in a later example. But yeah, this is what's going to let us, this is invoked by Burp when that HTTP request is about to be sent. And then when we were talking about Java docs earlier, if you'll see that at param, that notation right there, that's used in the Java doc. So that's just an example of how to document your code, and it'll return, and you can generate that Java doc just with detailed sorry, create a detailed Java doc. Sorry, lost my, but yeah, this is the interface we're going to represent earlier. So this is, this is just for the request and the response received. So this, and I'll sit here and I'll just read what they have. So the extension can implement this interface and then call the register HTTP handler to register an HTTP handler. The handler will be notified of requests and responses made and received by any Burp tool. Extensions can perform custom analysis or modification of these messages by registering an HTTP handler. So next, we're going to make that simple class. So what we need when we make the class, well, we need the imports. The package we don't necessarily need, but we're going to include it in the example. But we need to import the stuff that we need from the Montoya API. And then in Java, we're going to have our class and our constructor. We need to create our own object. And then in the methods are going to allow us to do something. So in Java, we're going to have our methods, then we're going to need to do something or allow our code to do something. So in this example, we have our package up at the top and then any package because this is a demo. And then we have our import. So from the Montoya API, we're going to import the HTTP handler, HTTP request to be sent, HTTP response received, the request to be sent action, and the response received action. And then in the public class, look, mom, I'm doing a webinar. We have our class and class variables being declared. And then from there, we have our constructor and constructor assignment. And then we have our interface declaration. And then this at override, that is our compiler check. So that's just the Java annotation. That's what we tell. So we are overriding that. We're overriding something. So we're telling the compiler, but it's also a great thing to do if you're working on a team project or somebody else is going to be looking at your code, because it's a good way to note to them that what's happening here. And then all we're going to do here is, so we are going to just log all the method is doing, and all it's doing is just logging the URL and the status code of the response received. And then in our method return statement, if we were going to use that, if we were going to use that in another class, we just we'll be able to return it and use it in another class or somewhere else. So a couple quick thoughts. So when you're using the Montoya API, it has to include the Burp extension interface. So you need a class that implements the Burp extension interface. So that's going to be your extension's entry point, is where you're going to implement that interface. And that's it. You're just going to import burp.api.montoya.extension.extension. And when that's initialized, that's how we gain access to the Montoya API. And this is a case of a do as I say, not as I do, is to design the flow first. So I think it's been like the last 3 projects that I've done where I feel like I've spent more time at the end trying to get it worked around, because it was trying to refactor the code, or actually not refactoring the code, because I had said like, oh, it'll be a simple script, I can get it done there, and then 2,000 lines of JavaScript later, I need to refactor to make the code more efficient. So it does really help to design the flow first. What classes are going to do what. And then you are able to submit your extension if it meets certain requirements to the BAP store. So I did put this on here from these are the requirements from Port Swigger's site if you wanted to submit an extension. So it has to have a unique name. It can't conflict with another name out there, and it has to be somewhat descriptive of what the extension does. The name has to be clear. It has to be secure. So if you're designing something, you can't use insecure coding practices or put the user at more risk than they were prior to your extension being installed. They do require that your extension has to include all dependencies. So it has to be bundled in at the time. and it has to use threads. So when you're coding, this is a way to help the UI. So Portswigger doesn't want your extension to make their product look bad. So when you're, this takes into account for slower processes. You know, a thread is going to have its own stack and its own register. And yeah, the extension has to unload cleanly. So when you're unloading the extension, one thing, and I've encountered this before, where you write an extension and when you unload it, it'll cause burp to crash, or there'll be some issues. Again, kind of back to why you need to use threads. Like Portswigger wants Burp Suite to run. They don't want their product to look bad as well. So when your extension is unloaded, it has to unload cleanly, and it has to use burp networking. So you can't use like java.net.url in there. You have to use burps networking. And one example they gave, or with it talking about offline working, why they need it to work offline. The example they gave is if a lot of the, or not a lot, but they had mentioned in the example, like an air gap network, or they have customers that are clients that work in situations that don't allow, or secure environments that don't require, or are not allowed internet access. So the extension to get it submitted into the BAP store needs to be able to work offline, and it has to work with large projects. So that was one of the extensions that I wrote. It worked with small projects, but when it got to, you know, like maybe we'll say like a 2 gig file, just didn't want to work. 2 gig project file, it just didn't work. And then it needs a parent for the GUI elements, and the reasoning behind that is that it needs. So if you're working with dual monitors, it doesn't, if you have a pop-up or we'll use a pop-up, for example. If you have a pop-up and you don't have that, and it doesn't, that parent element, or the parent isn't there for the GUI element, your pop-up may end up on another screen, and it just might not, for usability, you want that in there. And then it has to use a Montoya API artifact, and that's where in their documentation it says Gradle or Maven. And the reason being, so there's a couple ways you can get to the Montoya API, and because you can take the community edition, you can decompile that jar, or you can unpack that jar, and inside there the Montoya API will be in there, and you can use that. Highly frowned upon, not highly frowned upon, but they discourage it, and they want the Montoya API artifact. So that's, you know, import or having it in your pom.xml file for Maven, that's going to give you that artifact. Okay, so I think we've got about 5 minutes. I'm gonna quit sharing here for a second, and I'm gonna pull up my VM, and we're gonna go over, or kind of show the last extension I made. And awesome. And kind of bring it all together. So what we discussed at a real high level for this class. Let me grab a quick drink. All right. So the extension I made was what it was is, ideally what I wanted to do was like visualize web requests the response and all that, what's loaded as a burp extension. Now burp just wasn't the right tool for that. I ended up offloading a lot of it to a Flask app. But what I needed was access to the burp project history. So what I have, this is the extension loading. And we have that. What this does is it gives it, so I can either specify a path and a file name to make a JSON file from the project history, or I have an API server. So Burp does have an API server, but it's basically to start and stop scans. It doesn't have much functionality to it. So this extends, what this does is it gives me I'm able to make an API call and get the JSON history. So I can use my Burp project history in another tool. But what I kind of wanted to go over just at a high level is the structure. So I've got my Visual Studio, and then we have our packages. So one thing with a Java package, it's just an added defense is when you specify by package, it is a way if you're coding for like a large project, more outside of like a burp extension, you can set up like access control boundaries by package. It's not the best, but it is there where you can do that. I didn't want to move that, but so we have in here in our project file, we have our burp, which is going to have the Montoya API, and then we have what my class here. So basically what it's doing, Wichita is going to be our entry point, and I'll apologize ahead of time. I'm terrible with variable names. So that's kind of more of a, if you're just getting into it, a do as I say, not as I do. But what this does is this gives us the GUI portion inside Burp, and it's our application entry point. And then I have divided it up by classes. So I have a class that's able, or I have a class that creates that Spark server. And so in the Spark server is basically it's a wrapper for a Jetty server. So it's perfect for making REST API calls. Because what I needed to do, my use case is I needed my JSON output of the project file, so other tools could consume it. So I have that in this one here. So I'm importing the Spark server, which I also in my pom.xml, I'm bringing that in as a dependency here. And when I'm able to call it here, or to import it here, and this is what gives us that API server. So in there are and then in this one this is really, I just added this because I took a bunch of stuff out, and this one, if this particular class here, this is just what gives me if you'll see the welcome to AgraFinder, the journey begins flowing across the panel. That's what gives me that. And then maybe outside of this is what I'm using to actually write the file to create that JSON file. But that is, if we had a little bit more time, which I thought I'd wrap up a little sooner, I was going to dive in, but this, I think this is a good place to stop.
Hey, Dave.
Hey,
Hey, how you doing?
good, good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was there more code stuff you wanted to show, or
If we got some time, I was going to kind of just walk through the whole thing, but
just just keep going, Dave?
just keep going. Okay.
Keep going.
Okay.
I'll go backstage. You keep going.
All right. All right. So we do have a little bit more time. So I did want to kind of tie into this. So what we have is when you're thinking about dividing up your project, when you're just starting out, when you're making your Java file, which is gonna, when you compile it, the .java will be the .class. You want to start logically creating boundaries between for what each action is going to do. So if you're going to create, in this example, if I needed to create that API server, I want that in its own class. If I'm going to be doing visualization elements, I want that in its own class. And really, personally, I'd like to have an entry point as its own class. So when the app entry point, just make it its own class. And then creating the JSON file in this example, making that its own class. It turns out it makes your life a lot easier when you're troubleshooting or in the event that you want to add something, remove. And take that from, I've tried creating, or just out of bad habit, I've created just one class to handle it all. It's a pain to troubleshoot. But ultimately what we have are, sorry, what we ended up doing. So what this will end up doing, what this extension ends up doing here is I used 1Password. And the reason I use them, they have a bug bounty, and this one's in game. We're not actually, or it's fair play. We're not actually going to hack it, but so we have built up a list of their accounts, or not their accounts, sorry. When we load up the login page, this is what these URIs load. And then if we create our API server, this right here, that's probably not fun to watch. I just realized, but this is going to give it, this gives me the JSON output of the history of my burp project history, or the project history, the burp history. So what I have here, now I'm able to take that into a different tool and use it what I need it for. So what I have, actually oh, forgot I updated that. So what I have here, this is the visualization tool. We got a couple minutes. I can show that. Let's actually write it to a project file for that though. And the reason I'm writing it, not using the API, because the history, the way I wrote it, there's a history and an update endpoint. The history endpoint it'll give you the JSON once, but then it resets and it only update, and then the history is cleared out, and it'll only provide or you have to get the rest through update. And what this is doing, so this is, I tried doing the visualization in Burp Suite, but it just wasn't didn't work well with the memory. It was just easier to port it into a flash server. It just kept causing burp to crash. But here, now I'm able to get with this API v2 pre-registration features, I get to find out what resources loads in there, and where it's pulled into. So I use this. This was a need that I wanted, and that's why I created the burp extension. Well, and this tool as well. But this helped me out. It helps me out with my testing kind of audit, and I'm able to visualize some of the requests. And when you get into JavaScript, like a single page application that is pulling in from 100 different places, and it's got JavaScript loading, that's loading JavaScript, that's loading kind of like an infinite JavaScript load and redirects, this helps out. So, all right, I think that's a good place to stop.
Also, I was muted, so all of that was nothing. Okay. Dave, if you could sum up everything that you talked about today in one final thought, if you could just say, hey, here's everything, and if I could just say one thing, what would it be? What would it be, Dave?
Yeah, one final thought. Burp extensions have made my life better, and having been able to create my own have helped me as a tester. So I encourage you to as well.
All right. And Moto JP said burping ain't easy. All right. So well done, Dave. First, Black Hills Information Security Webcast. How do you feel?
I feel good. I feel okay.
Yeah.
Felt like I talked too much.
Well, when there's no one to it's just
Yeah.
I'm gonna talk at you, and then I got to watch the chat, so I got a chance to see everyone like interacting and posting memes and gifs. Memes and gifs are the head nods of the internet generation, the Zoom generation. So whenever you see a gif or head nod, just imagine people smiling in an audience or going like this, right? All right. So Dave, I have a question that I ask every tester, and it's a very personal question, and it's at the very end. And if people need to go, understood. If you didn't get your gift of the survival guide and the comic book, Deb's going to post it into the chat. Yep. So you can order it. Apparently, some of you ordered it as far as Argentina and New Zealand before we realized, oh no, because it's fine. Costs like $100 a piece, but
we'll probably throw in other things in there just to make it the shipping.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. We probably suck at capitalism, and this is an example. All right, so Dave, here's the question I ask everyone. It's incredibly personal, and it may cause you to think deeply about your life and the choices you've made. Are you ready, Dave?
I was, but then after that, we'll see. We'll see.
All right. During a test, if you are not finding a way to bypass someone's security or not finding vulnerabilities, if you're not finding something to exploit, do you feel like they have good security and they have secured themselves, or do you feel like your skills are lacking and you need to improve?
I always think it's a me problem. Not like it's just always like I always will think I'm doing something wrong over like the security. Turns out maybe the security's great, but it's just the way I am, I guess.
Yeah. No, and the reason I like to ask that question is because I was on Paul Security Weekly one time, and they had a guy that had a piece of software that would fuzz stuff and look for vulnerabilities. And so I asked them the question. I was like, if you don't find any, let's say you run your tool. If you don't find anything, do you assume that your tool is fantastic and they have no issues, or do you assume that your tool is terrible and it can't find the issues? And like you could see, it was the first time you ever thought, like, I had not thought about that. So, for those of you out there that are learning pen testing, learning Burp Suite, learning these things, if you don't know how to do them when you're first getting started, well, keep learning them. But also sometimes their security is just very good. And as a pen tester, you've just come across something that they've done a very good job. And sometimes it's not you, and sometimes it is. So, all right, Dave. I am going to ask the audience a question here, and we're going to look at the chat. So this was a beginner's guide to burps extensions. So I'm going to ask the audience, did you feel like this was beginner, below beginner, or above beginner? Just so that you can see, because sometimes when you're creating content, you think something's beginner, but it's actually not beginner, or you think something's beginner and it's actually, is beginner. So
Gonna get lots of different.
Yeah.
answer. Just like Goldilocks porridge. I like that.
And Dave, this is your feedback, so that way, if you're looking at making content in the future, it's just there's nothing good or bad about it. It's just, yeah, we have a different, diverse audience of people who have knowledge and skills, and so we're just trying to figure out. Yeah, beginner is relative. That is correct. Beginner is relative. If you haven't checked in for Hackett, please do so. And if you have questions for Dave, we're going to ask those questions now.
I didn't really see a lot during, so if we missed something, now's the time to ask the question to Dave. We have a little bit of time left. And if not, that's fine. That means Dave did a great job of answering everything.
Yeah. Okay. Great overview. Definitely necessary to do further research on subjects brought up. Thank you for that comment. Dave, did you have any thing that you wanted to say, came up that you're like, oh, I forgot that? If not, that's fine.
There was a point on there. The point was, I think the hardest thing for me for starting I just wanted to make a point with starting from to develop anything is to just get over I don't know where to start. But I think if I can make things as simple as possible in my mind. So if I just know hey, I need a method, I need a class, and I need this class, or I need this method to do this. If you just kind of take the big picture and just make the little items, it helped me out. So I meant to keep kind of talking about that in the talk, and I think I missed that a couple times. So that's the only thing I'd like to add.
Yeah. And Dave, some of the feedback I'm seeing is that it was slightly above beginner, but you did a really good job of explaining and introducing new concepts. So yeah, so some people were saying beginner, a little above beginner, but as far as you did a good job of going back and saying, this is what this is where it came from. This is good. So, all right. Any from someone coming from Python and wanting to write burp extensions, that's the only main purpose for learning Java. Do you recommend Java or Kotlin?
Me personally, I will tell you, I would recommend Java. Now, I will say there's a Dana Epps. He's a kind of prolific API hacker, and that he is all 100% in on Kotlin. So, for whatever reason, I like Java. It's just more what I'm comfortable with. And why, if you're coming over from Python, the thing I would like to is with Java, there's going to be more examples out there. If like with the Portswigger's documentation, if you can keep it in Java rather than try to learn the new language and not have the examples as well. So I would say Java. Short answer, Java.
Cool. I think we're going to end with this question. Well done, Dave. Have you tried ChatGPT to create burp extensions?
I've not. No. Do I need to?
Our AI overlords would say yes.
So I kind of on that, I had this thought, so the 70s always had good music that came out, and I wonder if the music would be so good if ChatGPT was around and it was all kind of created by AI, or so I'd like to, it's point being on that is I feel like I still get to use my brain a little bit when I'm coding. So
yeah. All right, so everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. If you're in Discord, please stick around. There's the career chat section where you can actually get career advice. If you're currently job hunting, please put the word hunter into the Discord chat, so that way we can give you the job hunter role, which will unlock a message board for you. But here's the thing, once you actually engage today with the webcast live, that automatically unlocks the message board for you. And the only reason we have it locked is so that way people don't spam our server. They don't come in. So you actually have to engage in some way for us to build a little bit of trust with you before we unlock that message board. But if you have a job that you currently need to fill a role on your team, feel free to use the Black Hills Discord server. And I know that might be weird that we're a company and we're a pen testing company and we do red teaming, we do all these things. You're somehow finding people to hire from this community. Like, no, it's totally fine because there's like 40,000 people here and there's an opportunity for them to come join your team. And here's the thing about the people who are watching this. They want to get better. They want to learn new things and they want to improve themselves. That's why they're here. And so that would make a great person to potentially hire onto your team. So if you want to post a job, just say the word hunter too. We'll give you the job hunter role just so that you can, post the job that you're currently hunting or trying to fill. All right, Dave. Thank you so much, Dave. This was your first Black Hills webcast. I'm going to reach out to you soon about scheduling your next one for next year. We're already scheduled out until like April of next year. So somewhere in the summer or in the fall. And Deb, any final thoughts for you? Kindness and generosity director.
Well, when you said the summer, I started thinking about all the new fun shirts that we'll have created. And you don't have to spotlight me, Yuri. I really hate that. That's my final thoughts. But yes, no, thank you guys so much for being here. We realize that you have lots of different options on where to invest your time. There's no shortage of things to watch now and have your intention. So we appreciate that you give us an hour of your day every week. We love it.
Yeah. All right, Yuri.